which is why the Matrix was redesigned to this. The peak of your civilization.
In 1989, the Cold War ended. In 2001, the Twin Towers fell. But in between was an era of relative stability for America. The economy soared, politicians balanced the budget, and the president played sax on Arsenio. Even The Simpsons saw the stability happening during the 1990s.
What's wrong with this country? Can't a man walk down the street without being offered a job?
There's been plenty of discussion about movies reflecting the tragedy and chaos during the time they were made, such as monster movies showing Cold War anxieties, and 21st century horror movies conveying fears of acts of terror. But what about movies that came out during a time of general peace and security? In other words, how can a film reflect stability? Maybe one of the best years in film to explore this question is 1999. Not only is it the turn of the millennia and the end of a prosperous decade, but that year also had many movies that deal with the stable, uneventful world of the 90s. Let's see what the most popular movies can tell us about that unique moment in history.
This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century.
The 90s were defined by more than just stability in the present. Because of that stability, people very actively looked into the future. The dot-com bubble of the late 90s and early 2000s provides a great example of this forward thinking. Tech companies weren't being valued on what they were currently worth, but what they could be worth.
We marveled at our own magnificence as we gave birth to AI.
Of course, with those positive outlooks also came anxieties. Technology led to fears of the Y2k bug, the idea that the switch to the year 2000 would crash many vital computer systems and create chaos. It's actually what Peter has to fix at his job in Office Space. From here, we get what makes some 1999 movies so 1999. In general, movies released in that year were not about surviving the present because the present was actually going well. They were about being tired of that stable present and looking for a radically different future. It's a timely take on the hero's journey, where the call to action isn't caused by some epic circumstance, but from the lack of epic.
And yeah, what do you do there?
I sit in a cubicle.
Of course, not all movies from that year capture this idea, especially the genre movies and movies from a different time period. But the lack of epic does exist in a surprisingly large amount of them. Perhaps the most obvious symbol of that boring 90s lifestyle is from the recurring image of the plain cubicle, which shows up in many movies from 1999. They're a classic visual reminder of the dead-end job, a job that may be stable but has no future and no excitement. It's from this powerful visual that I affectionately named this style of movie the cubicle movie. But not every cubicle movie uses a literal cubicle to show this feeling. The Boondock Saints is a crime thriller about the criminal underworld in Boston. But even in a movie so far removed from corporate life, it still clearly showcases Rocco having that same unfulfilling stable job as a package boy for the mob.
I deserve it. I've been working for those fat bastards since I've been in high school. Look at this fucking place. You're fucking me, man.
So you don't have to have a literal desk job to show this 90s anxiety. Any character can be stuck this way, so long as it feels corporate, never changing, and stable to the point of boredom.
By Grabthar's hammer. What a savings.
It's not that filmmakers were actively trying to summarize the 90s climate. It's that every filmmaker made their movie within that period of time, so that period will inevitably influence the production. The cubicle movie has a premise based in that 90s stability, so a significant percentage of these movies create conflict out of a very similar atmosphere.
It doesn't really matter. I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm gonna go anymore.
The product of this stability is also monotony, and monotony allows space for introspection. As a result, a lot of these films deal with identity and stories about private lives. American Beauty is about the inner lives of suburban neighbors. While the setting of the film represents the idyllic American landscape of the time, the characters represent the anxieties underlying that pristine exterior. Both the families have unfulfilling home lives. The father is a borderline sexual predator, and the neighbor is a secret white supremacist who also happens to have repressed homosexual feelings. This movie criticizes the perceived stability of the era, suggesting that it's simply a mask that hides the true self. The flowers in the garden, the couch, and the 90s lifestyle are not true beauty, but rather mimicking beauty. It's an artificial American beauty. Fight Club takes this opportunity for introspection and turns it into a conversation about manhood. A world without conflict means a world where men don't have a way to assert their own masculinity, so the characters go to great lengths to manufacture conflict and chaos to satisfy their masculine impulses. The movie satirizes this way of thinking as an ineffective and unproductive way to find purpose. Even though the film was intended as a cautionary tale, many men took it a bit too literally. Maybe the satire was too relevant. Really, the movie reminds us that the stability and uneventfulness of the 90s was largely a middle-class white male phenomenon. Films starring minorities or women, like Boys Don't Cry and All About My Mother, show us that for some people, the 90s were anything but boring and stable. These movies highlight the issues still present underneath that stable suburban exterior. Cubicle movies star men who have so little conflict in their life that they seek it out, and they can only really do so because they have the time and the money. And there's no movie from 1999 that expresses the ideas of the cubicle movie more than Being John Malkovich. The film exaggerates the oppressive corporate imagery in films like Office Space by creating an absurd office with low ceilings. Here the office literally bears down on its employees. When Craig discovers a portal that lets you live in John Malkovich's mind for 15 minutes, he uses it to escape his boring life. He even monetizes the portal, and it has massive appeal to people who are tired of their boring lives and want to mimic the seemingly exciting life of a celebrity. Craig uses Malkovich's status for sexual gratification and career goals, but these shallow desires never lead him to true happiness. Living the life of someone else means he never worked to make his own life better. He tried to escape his problems by mimicking someone else, instead of exploring what was within himself. Charlie Kaufman said he wrote the film while he worked as a writer on the TV show Get a Life. The best part of the show came from the scripts written by its original creators, so all the other writers tried to imitate their voice. The result, he said, was extremely unfulfilling, not only because it wasn't personal work, but because mimicking someone else inherently means that you are not interesting enough. Being John Malkovich, and to an extent all cubicle movies, seem to reflect this idea in some way. Social forces compel us to conform ourselves into a certain definition of success, like having the good job and a comfortable life. But having to do this requires the belief that who we already are isn't good enough. I think cubicle movies are trying to remind us that we are worth it. The point is, there doesn't have to be some crisis going on for a movie to reflect world events. 1999 had this crazy phenomenon where nearly a dozen major Hollywood releases feature a main character tired of the stability, monotony, and uneventfulness of their life. And it's a perfect mirror of what America was like in the late 90s. The movies of that year reminded people to reclaim their confidence and search for a more exciting and personal future. In other words, they reminded us to party like it's 1999.
So tonight I'm gonna party like it's 1999.
To truly understand the production of a movie, you also have to understand the time period it was made in. Another classic example of history influencing film is German expressionist cinema of the 1920s. Not only should you watch some of those movies, but to understand them better, I'd also recommend you learn about the impact of World War I on Germany, which greatly altered their society and in turn their movies. You can learn more about that time in the Secrets of World War I documentary, available on CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream has recently expanded their library of documentaries to more than 2,400 titles about everything from history to technology. These high-quality videos are a great way to broaden your understanding of the world around us. Go to curiositystream.com/nowyousseeit for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. Enter the promo code NowYouSeeIt when prompted during the sign-up process, and your membership is completely free for the first 30 days. Thanks for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters, who all got early access to this video before the general public.